Hello, I'm David Bowman. I am the tutoring coordinator for the Three Rivers Education Foundation Literacy Initiative. And as you probably know, I've been preparing a series of videos, each of which deals with instruction in the various six components of reading. This time we're going to take a quick look at one issue that seems to cause a lot of confusion, and that is the area of phonemic awareness. So when we're talking about phonemic awareness, first, what do we actually mean? And then what does phonemic awareness look like in practice? And what do we know about instruction in phonemic awareness? So first, a broad definition. When we say phonemic awareness, what we are really talking about is the ability for students to be able to identify the sounds that are within a particular word, and then also to be able to manipulate or change those sounds. So it's really two different things. It's identifying and it's manipulating sounds. Now, like all of the areas in reading, the different components, phonemic awareness also has a variety of subskills. Just being able to identify and manipulate really encompasses a lot of different types of action. They are matching, isolation, completion, blending, deletion, reversal, differentiation, and manipulation. Let me take just a moment and explain a little bit more about what each of these subskills are. So, in no particular order, when we talk about differentiation, what we're talking about is being able to determine whether or not sounds the same. For example, if we ask students which word has a different last sound, car, door, doll, or near, the student with phonemic awareness, good phonemic skills, will be able to identify the word that has a different last sound. When we talk about phoneme matching, we're doing pretty much the opposite. We're looking for which sounds are the same. So, for example, we could ask a student which word begins with the same sound as the word phone. Is it further, pocket, tone, or open? With phoneme deletion, what we're talking about is being able to take the sounds within a word and then remove one or more of those sounds and be able to identify what's left. So we could say, for example, for phoneme deletion, say the word remote. What now? Say the word remote, but leave off the re sound. And now what do you get? Well, you get moat. Okay, now with moat, remove or delete the M sound, the sound, and now what do you have? You have oat. So that's deletion. Now with phoneme isolation, what we are talking about is being able to pick out individual sounds within words. For example, if I say, what sound do you hear at the beginning of the word access? The student with that skill would be able to say ah, which is the first sound. Also, when we talk about phoneme completion, we're basically saying, okay, here's a part of the word, now fill in the part that's missing. So, for example, I could say, finish this word for me, buh, and the student might say, ka, book would be the thing. Or if I say, maybe a slightly older example for older students, if you appreciate something, then you have appreciation, and the student would come up with the missing sound there. So that's phoneme completion. Phoneme blending is, it's the old Sesame Street model basically. I say, what word do you hear from these sounds? Gr, a, f, e, k. And the student would be able to say graphic. Basically, take multiple sounds and blend them together into a single word. With phoneme segmentation, it's much like the identification process, but now we're looking at all the sounds within a word. So I could say, for example, how many sounds do you hear in the word book? B, k. So there's three there, and I can identify what those are. Phoneme reversal, another one of the sub skills, is basically to take a particular sound and then be able to provide it backwards. So, for example, if I say the sound re, And what do you get if you turn it around backwards? Ear. Ear. So forwards and backwards, or reversal. With manipulation, manipulation is a bit like blending. It's a bit like some of the other sub skills that we have here. But for example, if I say, okay, start with the word read, and I'm gonna ask the student, well, what sounds do you hear? R, E, D. Okay, now let's manipulate those sounds. Let's swap them out and change them around. So say the same word re, but instead of the E sound, put an sound. What do you get now? Well, you go from read to red. And now that we say red, take the sound and change it for ah. So now we go from red to rod. And if I change the ah sound to an o sound, what do I get now? Road. So that's manipulation, being able to change out sounds and create new words from what the result is of those. So those are the various sub-skills within phonemic awareness. So when we're talking about phonemic awareness, identify and manipulate sounds, we're really talking about all of these various sub-skills here. But there's one very important point that needs to be made. When we're talking about phonemic awareness, we're really talking about sound. We're not talking about turning written text into sound or sound into written text. That's more the realm of phonics. Think about it this way. This is something that I hear people say pretty often, and I think it makes a lot of sense. If you can do it with your eyes closed, chances are what you're doing is phonemic awareness, because you're just thinking about the actual sounds in your ears or in your headphones. You're not looking at the letters on a page. It's just the sound. So if kids are doing these behaviors and they can do them with their eyes closed, that's phonemic awareness. All right. So with that definition, we have a lot of clues about how we can go about helping kids to develop their phonemic awareness skills or their phonological skills. Now that we know what those specific skills are, we can devise strategies to help students build up in each of those areas. And there are some very specific things that the research tells us, and we have shown to be true with our students in tutoring. The first and foremost is that instruction in phonemic awareness needs to be explicit and systematic, where we're saying we are going to study these skills, we are going to study these sounds here. Okay. Later, we're going to go to more complicated sounds, or we're going to go to diphthongs, or we're going to go to syllables, or we're going to go to much higher levels. But it has to be explicit. Here is what we're going to learn, and systematic. We're going to learn this, and then this, and then this, and then that. As we're doing that, what the research in our practice tells us is, let's just focus on one or two phonemes at a time. Okay, we're going to be using a lot, and as we're manipulating and so on like that, we're going to cover a lot of different sounds within words. But what is the focus of our instruction? And really, it should be just a couple of sounds at a time. Just one or two at a time, so we don't kind of overwhelm the learning process. And what that begins to do with explicit systematic instruction focusing on one or two phonemes is it starts to help the student develop mental patterns. Now, we're probably not going to be able to teach students how to manipulate all the sounds that we use in the language, but we start developing those patterns about how words work and how sounds work and how they combine and how they change and how we can manipulate them to create language. All right. So we really set that mental stage, and then students, once they grasp the fundamentals of it, can basically take it from there on their own. So one of the things that I mentioned is that there are some very simple skills and they progress through much more challenging skills. And this is one of the reasons why we say phonemic awareness is not something that is just pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, maybe second grade. Now, as we're using the iReady assessment, there's a part in there that deals with phonemic awareness, and many students say tested out. And the tutors think, oh, the student tested out. We don't have to address it. That's not true. Because with most assessments, it is only looking at skills at the kindergarten, first, second grade level. And yet we know there are much more sophisticated levels as we start looking at diphthongs, and as we start looking at contractions, and as we start looking later at syllables and so forth, and we start talking about phrasing within language, which starts to kind of move to that oral language development piece. So we have to think about, of course, what can a student do, but there is a very long continuum of skills that will allow us to provide meaningful instruction in phonemic awareness all the way through the high school level. Okay, so those are some of the basic principles about how we structure phonemic awareness instruction. And there's and with a better understanding of the skill components, it shouldn't be all that difficult to devise instructional strategies to help students to develop each of those skills. But in general, here are some things that typically work. Any kind of question answer or oral response is going to work. And that's very much what I just demonstrated as I talked about the sub skills. What word do you get from these sounds? Ate. Okay, great. Okay, that's oral. That's sort of that oral response question answer strategy. And then any kind of identification strategies, I'm a big fan of I spy. I spy is something that ends with the letter or ends with the sound all. Oh, wall. Okay. I think that's a lot of fun. And it really helps to pinpoint and make students think about the sounds within words. So any kind of identification strategies is going to be good. Also, rhymes, songs, especially, thinking about younger kids in particular, if there's some behavior that goes along with those rhymes, behaviors or actions that go along with those songs, so we can use more than one sense, more than one part of the brain, all of that is probably going to be pretty effective. Well, along with rhymes and songs, that's repetition. Well, we are repeating sounds, or we are repeating words, and we're using those sounds in a wide variety of contexts. We're using them a lot of different ways. So that's where we get like the sound in read and in read. We call that restructuring. And certainly for helping students to identify the sounds within words, any kind of phoneme counting. How many sounds do you hear in this word, for example? Can you tap them out, for example? Anything that allows them to count is going to be effective. And as we get to the older grades, we might be looking at syllables within words, or we might be looking at that natural sort of rhythm, the natural music of the language. Where are the accents in these words? I thought I saw a little dog. Okay, I just made that up. So we can see that this whole counting and identification really does get to a more sophisticated level. It begins with how many sounds do you hear, and what are those sounds? And now let's change some of those sounds. So any kind of instructional activities that deal with sort of those principles and strategies that kind of align with this set right here is going to be very useful for helping students to develop their phonemic awareness. On the flip side, what doesn't work? Well, of course, anything with flashcards is not going to work because they have to actually read it, right? And then we are talking about phonics, not phonemic awareness. Similarly, anything with reading skills, because again, they're going from text to sound or text to speech. Well, phonemic awareness, no eyes, close your eyes, no text. Okay, it's just the sound. Similarly, any type of computerized instruction is not going to provide the same benefit as what you can do as a teacher. Worksheets, same thing. Oral reading, same thing. So we really have to be able to differentiate between our kids reading text and making sounds, or are they focused only on the sounds? Because over here, reading text is always going to be phonics. Over here, just thinking about the sounds, that's going to be phonemic awareness. So with that in mind, there are some things that we teach us with. We know that every component in reading is best taught when it is taught in conjunction with other types of skills. Well, if we're talking about sounds, we're also going to be talking about phonics. They are two different things, but we can teach them in conjunction. We can study the sounds of words and then see how they apply in text. What does it look like in text? And we can look at text and we can sound out those words and find the sounds and manipulate them and so forth. So those two, phonics and phonemic awareness, really can be taught at the same time, even though they are different things. We're also going to be talking about vocabulary development. If we're talking about sounds within words, well, we're talking about words. What do those words mean? And finally, oral language development, because we have to think about things like, how do you pronounce these types of words? What is the right way to pronounce them or the correct way to pronounce them? And interestingly, this also puts kind of a burden on the teacher because you're the role model in the pronunciation and the correct delivery of the sounds and the words. So you kind of have to think about, how are you speaking and what are the sounds that you are producing and what effect is it going to have on the student's understanding. So you have to think pretty carefully about, are you in fact articulating words carefully so that students can even begin to find the sounds within those words. So that's phonemic awareness right there. I hope you found this useful. We appreciate all that you're doing. I look at the student scores and I look at their gains and I read their letters and I know that you're making a huge difference in their ability to read. So for that, thank you very much from all of us at the Three Rivers Literacy Initiative. Have a great day.